Caucus started this evening. We have Larry West, City Business Administrator, and Chris Smith from DPW, as well as Valerie Moy and Tim Manning from Rubicon to give us an update on the Rubicon system that's been implemented down at DPW. So, floor is yours.
So good evening, Council. Thanks for the opportunity to come tonight again. I know there were some requests looking for some updates on the Rubicon system. So a couple things, currently still the acting DPW director. So a little bit of Rubicon knowledge I have has been working, it's been kind of a hit and miss with me, but we have been working hard to implement the Rubicon process, the Rubicon technology. And I think the folks here from Rubicon tonight could talk about what some of the goals that we had set and the timelines, and give council an update they're looking for. Chris Smith here, as you know, was appointed to as refuse supervisor in July of this year. I'd be remiss if I didn't remark that I think having Chris up at DPW doing the work, working with the folks from our refuse department has been ongoing. I think Chris has done a tremendous job up there, straightening and working out some of the kinks, not only with Rubicon, but from the daily grind of the task of refuse and recyclable collection. So I don't know if Chris, if you have anything to add to that, but if not, I could just turn it over to Valerie and Tim for the presentation. I will leave this microphone on. We do have speakers hooked up. This is virtual, but I'll leave the speakers on so the audio could be picked up as well, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you.
Valerie?
Okay, thank you so much. Good evening to the council members, and thank you for allowing us to come in and catch up with you today and update you on what we've done, work so far with the City of Scranton. My name is Valerie, and I'm the Customer Success Manager supporting the City of Scranton, and also support all of our cities throughout the Mid-Atlantic and Northeast region. So we are in good company with the municipalities we are serving, and I'll briefly pass over to Tim to introduce himself, and then we will jump right in.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Tim Manning. I am the director for the Midwest and Northeast for Rubicon. Been at Rubicon for about 6 years, and I work very closely with Valerie on a number of these key accounts. And I'm actually based in Boston, Massachusetts. Back to you, Rob.
Excellent. And as we go through, feel free to answer or ask us any questions. Hopefully our audio is okay so we can hear. If not, we'll ask Chris or somebody to relay those to us. But really wanted to just provide you an overview of, again, the contract that you've entered into with Rubicon Smart City team with the city. Update you on sort of the milestones that we've been going through as we've launched the system and are rolling out the usage. How is the Department of Public Works actually using Rubicon on a day-to-day basis? What does that look like? What is the data that's being put into the system? And then speak a little bit to the opportunities for efficiencies and cost savings. And then I have a separate bullet point all about the fleet optimization project. That is going to be, I think, one of the primary drivers of savings for City of Scranton. So really want to help you all understand what that process looks like, where we're starting from and where we're going. So just highlights for you all of the contract that we've got with City of Scranton. So we are on a 3-year contract that started earlier this year. What that includes is pieces of hardware, software, and some professional services. So on the hardware piece, we have devices that live on the trucks, or the drivers take into the trucks, that are keeping tabs on all of the solid waste routes that are running day to day. So just quickly, we have telematics devices. These geotab pods are plugged into the engine of all the trucks used for this operation. That's going to pull in information about how is the engine running, how fast is the truck going, how often are the drivers doing hard braking, hard turning, of course, the location with the GPS, mileage, fuel, all of that information is being pulled in automatically. And then in Scranton, we actually have iPad tablets that each driver takes out every day, and that is what they log into. That is what provides the driver the view of their route. It enables the driver to note issues with photos that they see out in the field, and it's really a communication device between management and drivers. Now for the management side of the house, we have the Rubicon Smart City Portal, which is accessible on web browsers back at the office. We'll also show you, we've got a mobile app version of this for supervisors, which I know Chris uses daily. But this is really where it's like the central command for the management to see real time what is happening on every single route with every single driver and every truck at any point in time during the day. And it also is historical analytics, so they can pull up trends, dive into how our route time is looking, how our issues being tagged, and we'll share a little bit of that with you here in a moment. And then last but not least, we completed an on-site training for management and drivers in late April. That's really we consider the platform being launched. And then we have a fleet optimization project, which is a 6-month project in which we've taken all of the baseline data which we've been gathering between May and now, and use that to redo the routes, and we're going to talk a lot more about that in just a moment. Now this, I know, is probably an eye chart for you. There's a lot of words on here, but this is the same project timeline that we provided back to council prior to procurement during the RFP stage, and just want to kind of orient you to where we are right now. So we actually spent February through April of this year getting the system set up. So that was our pre-launch phase for City of Scranton. What did that entail? With all of our hardware installed on the trucks and set up. We did a pilot refuel in 2020. We got rid of all of that customer data and uploaded fresh customer data because what had happened in that time period was City of Scranton, I think, also implemented OpenGov, and you had much better residential customer data. We worked with your finance department and your city planner, so we have much better data as the basis for the routes. That was a huge help for us. And then we went through the process of digitizing your routes. We're going to look at exactly what went into that for your understanding. And then we, of course, did driver training. So in May, we started this first phase, and I can say that we've really ticked off everything that we had laid out in that. Number one being driver adoption. We really focused very hard with Chris, Scott, and team to have drivers logging into routes every single day. If the drivers don't log in, we don't have great data. They've done an excellent job. They've been over 90% logging in every day since the beginning. And then going into the second phase, really the most important thing to note here is that we're continuing to implement new features as each phase goes on, one of those being digital pre- and post-trip inspections, really starting to look at some of the baseline data that's been developed, working with drivers to get them in the habit of noting issues at the curb with photos. Most importantly, we will be kicking off the fleet optimization project in November. And from there, you can see the rest of the timeline. The new routes, I'll just go ahead and kind of tee this up because that's what everyone wants to know. Those will be rolled out probably looking into summer of 2023. What that might entail, just as a heads up, is potentially changing day of service for some of your residents. As we've looked at your routes up until today, we can see that there's a big opportunity for streamlining those, consolidating them geographically and in different neighborhoods. So that communication process also will be part of the rollout of those new routes.
I have a quick question. So,
Go for it.
you just presented us the phase 1, 2, and 3, and when it was launched. So, phase 1 wasn't launched until May, correct? Your previous slide said May.
I'm sorry, someone will have to repeat the question.
Okay, so phase 1 launched in May, all right? The contract was the kickoff call, the contract was signed in December. Why the gap in time before initiating this?
So the question is, the contract was signed in December.
21.
Of 21, and in phase 1, you have May as the start, and the question is why was there a gap?
Great question. So we began, it was signed in December, we started our launch phase, which is really the pre-launch phase. So I'm going to show you some of the work that went into digitizing the routes, getting the equipment installed, and planning the training. So digitizing the routes and getting the customer data always takes us usually about 75 days with all the cities we work with. So that was what, that first, between February and April was our process of getting everything ready to go. We consider launch when we've actually trained the drivers. They're taking the technology out every day.
I can't hear her well, to be honest with
So
you.
you said that you consider launch the day that the drivers take it out? Was that what you said, the last thing you said?
The question is, you consider launch when the drivers take it out?
That's right. That's our terminology, yeah, we consider Rubicon launch once drivers have the technology out daily, and they've been trained.
All right, Chris, maybe you could send this over. So we had the original proposed timeline, we had a go-live date of March 14th. So that go-live date of March 14th was started data collection, or what would that date be?
So the question is, the start date of March 14th, was that part of data collection, or?
We had a go-live,
March
original
14th?
timeline we were given had a go-live date of March 14th. Was that delayed until
Yes,
May?
our go live, we took a significant amount of time digitizing the routes. So that our go live was end of April, after we came on site and did the training. So in March, we were very heavy into digitizing the routes and cleaning up all of that customer data.
It's a 3-year contract, correct? 3-year contract?
Thank you, Chris. So I'm going to go ahead, and if there are other questions, because the audio is tough for me to hear, you'll have to probably just summarize those for me. Okay, so I think it's really going to be helpful for you all to understand the starting point. In that time period, around February, March, when we were doing all of the digitization, where did Scranton start? So before Rubicon, the city had no maps of routes. To our knowledge, that included there were no digital maps, no paper maps. Routes really were just in drivers' heads. And so, as you can imagine from management, that was very difficult to understand exactly what addresses were covered on any given route by any given driver on a certain day. And from a resident perspective as well, this was the most detailed information out there about which areas were covered, during the daily schedule for trash and recycling. And also, my understanding is there was no reporting of tonnage of trash, recyclables, paper, cardboard that was being collected. So this was really kind of the starting point for Scranton. During that time period, we digitized 104 weekly routes, and so that is 5 days a week of trash collection. That's also your single stream recycling collection. which city refers to as commingled, and paper and cardboard routes. So we installed these telematics devices on all of the trucks, and we let the trucks run for several weeks, and what we could then see in Rubicon was exactly what was the travel path of each truck on each day. We overlaid those GPS points on top of the map of all the residential addresses, which we got from your finance team. And this was an extremely manual process. We had 3 team members tracing these routes out for the best of our ability. And that's what resulted in these digitized routes that live within Rubicon. So the result of that, you can see the count of routes for each of these waste materials, is that really for the first time, management had an awareness of the shape of the routes, the size of the routes, how many homes belong on each route currently. And this screenshot from the system really just goes to show you exactly how you can see every single address, what route it belongs to, how many stops are on that route. And then this really provides management with real-time visibility into route completion each day. And it gives them the ability to be flexible. If there's a disruption in the day, they can maintain coverage across routes. There's special features in Rubicon, which we can go into if you want, but the ability to alert drivers to special circumstances at individual addresses. This is all built into the system. When we did our pilot with the city in 2020, there was an estimated opportunity to save $34,000 per year based on this. Just to give you a sense of what goes into that calculation as part of our full cost accounting is, consulting fees that were avoided, so you didn't have to pay another company to come in and do this work for you. We did it for you. Avoidance of printing of daily route sheets. Again, in Scranton, y'all didn't have paper routes even before this, so that may not be as pertinent. But I think also day-to-day efficiencies in terms of driver saving time on routes, supervisor saving time, monitoring routes by having this visibility, and dispatchers not having to look here, there, and elsewhere to get information on what's going on in the field. One of the things that is my role as a customer success manager, I talk to our public works team every week, and we can always surface other opportunities to leverage Rubicon for different operations as well. So we've also, with Chris's help, who's gone out and tagged GPS with every single downtown litter can in the city and also within the parks. We've created now a route every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday for the public litter cans to become collected. So that's just one example of something that wasn't pre-planned for, but we're always cross-pollinating ideas from other cities that we work with, or ideas that your team brings to us, and getting those added to the system. And this route should be launching this week. Now, quickly, this really just meant to show you, give you an idea of the view that Chris, Scott, and the team have daily into Rubicon. Route progress throughout the day. So this view, for instance, shows you out of 15 daily routes, how many have been completed, how many have been started, and with any individual route, what proportion of the route has been completed, say at 2 p.m. This is the type of information that they need to be able to know, hey, I need to get another driver to assist this route to get it done in time. We have also the ability to do route playback, so if there's ever any question, if there's an incident in the field, a residential complaint, an accident, we can actually go back and watch exactly what the truck did, how did they travel, what speed were they going, what homes did they cross by, and it's also geofenced. So we have geofences placed around the truck yard and around the disposal facilities, and we know where the route is, so for every route, every day, we know exactly how much time they spent at the truck yard, how much time they spent at the landfill, how much time they spent actually collecting at homes. This is the basis of the fleet optimization that will be coming up. And beyond that, you know, a variety of analytics and canned reports that can be taken out of the portal. All right, and I also just wanted to mention how critical it is for supervisors like Chris to have access to this information in the field. We've developed this mobile app for them so they can see all the same information on the tablet out in the field. They know exactly which drivers are logged in, how many are assisting other drivers. They'll be able to see pictures from that same day that drivers have tagged, and disposal, all of that information. They can see the location of every truck in real time, navigate to those trucks. I know that's something that Chris has used quite a bit. They can communicate, they can blast out two-way messages to all the drivers, safety observation reports. There's a lot of capabilities that they also have in the field. This is a really big one that I wanted to spend some time on. So, and thanks to Chris, the drivers have started doing this with much more regularity. One of the big selling points about Rubicon is to empower drivers to document the problematic conditions that they may or may not see out in the field. And we have purposely categorized some of the most common issues that they will come across, whether that's resident not having their can out on time, residents putting out bulk items without a proper, service request, contamination in recycling. They're not going to pick up recycling with trash mixed into it because that could contaminate the entire load. And if a resident calls and they want to know why wasn't their recycle collected or their trash, this is the driver's best defense to say why they didn't collect it, and also have this available in real time to your dispatchers, to your team back at the office that's fielding those calls. This is also the biggest tool that you all as a city can use to reduce the amount of times you have to send a driver back after the route's done to go and pick up a missed collection. Our estimate is that it costs the city $39 every time you send a truck back, and that's staff time, that's fuel, that's mileage, that's wear and tear on the vehicles. Add that up over a year, and that can be substantial cost saving for the city when it's implemented. And just to give you all a sense of how much the drivers are tagging issues and what are the common items that they're tagging, and again, these all have photos that are associated to that residential address. So the not outs are the big ones, so the black bars, the not outs, but also contamination, bulk items, illegal dumping, and overflowing. The other thing I'll mention is not just necessarily cost avoidance. There could also potentially be revenue opportunities if you all, through code enforcement, do charge for any of these things as citations. So there's not sending trucks back, and there's also ability to identify potential repeat offenders at certain addresses. We really coach drivers to focus in on residents that continuously put the wrong items in the trash or in the recycling or any of these issues. And that's an analysis that we regularly do, is identifying repeat offenders. It can be used to target education, to send code enforcement out, and all of that. Last but not least, tonnage tracking. Again, I know there's a fee for residents in the city, and what you want to be able to know is for each route, which consists of a certain number of homes, over the course of a year, how much tonnage is being collected off of that route, and you can back that down to average pounds per home, and just have visibility into different areas that produce more volume of trash or recycling in the city. This is a really key component of what we're going to end up using for fleet optimization, and my understanding is there is really next to no visibility on this data before Rubicon. What we're also gathering is how much time trucks are spending at the landfill, because in most cities there can be a line that takes up throughout the day as they're waiting to dispose. But that is a key part. We need to know how much time to build into routes for that, and it's also a key data point for you all to think about if there's ways to reduce that amount of time spent at the landfill. We've also implemented as part of our software automated checks, so if we identify trucks going into those landfills but not submitting weight tickets, your management team will have those flagged so they can make sure that data does get incorporated. Another key one, working with Scott, is around all the engine data and hard driving data that's coming off of those telematics devices. So we can see where all the hard driving occurrences are, where all the speeding occurrences are, and also fault codes coming off of the engines. And we've looked at some of this with your team, and we've identified certain roadways and areas where there is some of this going on. But this information, we can trace all this back to drivers, and that's a tool that can be used to educate or speak with certain drivers on how they're handling these trucks. And this can lead to fewer accidents, and also more preventative maintenance on certain trucks that are having more fault codes or being driven in a certain way. All right, we've done a lot this year. The other thing that we implemented really from the very beginning was digital pre and post-trip inspections. This is a DOT requirement, and this information has to be archived for a certain amount of time. I understand that before Rubicon was done on paper, and it was not always done with 100%. But the pre-and trip has to be filled out before the driver can get onto their route. They cannot bypass it. So we've seen much better participation in drivers filling this information out. These issues that they look at as part of the inspection can be actually documented with photos, and we can set up real-time alerts to the fleet team whenever any critical item is checked off by the driver. They have to sign off on it, and that is all archived digitally within the system. The fleet team has access to know exactly which vehicles have open issues. They can close those issues out, and all of this information is, of course, downloadable by the team. This is another potential driver of savings. Even Scott on y'all's team has said that an en-route breakdown is 6 times more expensive than planned preventative maintenance. So having this visibility is key, and in our pilot report, we said preventing 1 breakdown annually on a route could save the city $50,000. So that is feeding into that preventative maintenance. Now, the part that I'm going to go into now is about the fleet optimization project. These charts on the right-hand side are really just an example. This is just showing you balancing out route time for one of the other cities that we've worked with. You can see the variability in the average time that it takes to complete each route. And the goal of that optimization was really to balance that out so it's more equitable across your crews, and also avoiding overtime scenarios by having the routes spaced out. When we did the pilot project with Scranton, we noted that trip time and stop count on the routes was significantly lower than other similarly sized cities. So that gave us a clue that there is opportunity to consolidate some of those routes. And the reported cost savings of our pilot report, which was to the tune of $395,000, was really based on an estimate of taking one crew out daily through that consolidation of routes. What I want to show you now is a couple of maps of what your current state routes look like and what we think we'll be able to improve upon when we go through this optimization. Now I'm going to take a moment and just kind of explain this, these two maps. On the left-hand side, this is a look at the Monday trash routes. And again, this is something that we traced GPS trails of every truck on Monday that picks up trash. And we now know, because they've been running this for several months, this is what your trash routes look like. And similarly, on the other side, I included a map of some of the recycling routes on Wednesday. These are just examples from 2 different days and 2 different waste streams. But when we were going through this process, and I've got colleagues on my team that have worked in solid waste departments that helped me with this process, and we weren't sure if we were seeing what we were seeing because it was so odd to us. But what we noticed right off the bat is that your routes have a lot of dispersed, what we call islands, disconnected areas of the city that a single truck is going to service on a Monday in this case. So you can see, just as an example, this red route is traversing great distances, and there may have been some rationale behind this when the route was developed, or most likely just evolved over time. Similar thing with this route, and we see the same thing under commingled routes. So this was very curious to us, and not a standard best practice for green solid waste routes. Another thing that we noticed, which typically we want to avoid, is route interlacing. So if we look over in this area for your recycling collection, we've got 3 routes that are all jumbled together. We have multiple trucks traversing this area, picking up cross streets. The boundary between these routes is quite blurry, and what this leads to in practice is lack of clarity of which address is supposed to be picked up by which truck. When a resident calls in, they said they missed their collection, it's not sure exactly which driver to go to and ask about what happened. And again, it's just an extra mileage and wear and tear on trucks that's unnecessary by covering the same area. So ultimately, what the food optimization is going to do, and I've given some examples here, to try and illustrate what your routes look like today versus what they can and will look like when we go through optimization. And I've got several different Rubicon cities here to show you is that solid waste routes should look like contiguous but discrete areas. So we don't want to see any overlapping or interlacing. And we definitely don't want to see islands of different parts of the city being collected by one truck on one day. So as we go through the optimization process, we'll see this consolidation. There will be a reduction in mileage and better customer service by having more delineation, clear delineation between neighborhoods and routes. And I just wanted to provide you a little bit of context with another similarly sized city in the region that we work with, who's seen some really great actual documented savings here. So they, since working with Rubicon, we've been with Harrisonburg about 1.5 years. They've noted they've reduced route times by 1 hour per day across all routes they run, which comes out to a significant savings for the city. Not just time, but also mileage reductions. Also reducing the fuel costs, the wear and tear on vehicles, and for their climate action plan, reducing those CO2 emissions was very important for them. And then also reducing the paper printing costs So they've won a Smart Victory Award through their work on routing Rubicon and gotten a lot of great press, made progress towards their climate goals. So I just wanted to share that example with you all. And I believe we're going until 6:30, so happy to address any additional questions that you'll have.
Do any,
Oh, I'm sorry.
do any council members have any questions?
Yeah, I do. So maybe I didn't hear correctly. I can't hear you that well to begin with, and I apologize. So how big is Harrisonburg, Virginia, in comparison to Scranton? I'm looking at these numbers. Do they make sense with us, or are they comparable?
The question is, how big is Harrisonburg compared to Scranton?
I looked this up, Harrisonburg, I believe is around, 70,000 residents, I think Scranton's around 90, if I'm not mistaken. So they're a slightly smaller city, but, you know, running, slightly fewer routes, but, you know, if you kind of scale up to their route size, probably your savings, you know, will be a little bit larger than what Harrisonburg is.
Councilman McCann, it looks like Harrisonburg is about 54,000 people, residents, based on Wikipedia, just searching real quick.
Okay, so I have another quick question. So, with all due respect, I'll be honest with you, when this legislation came to me last year, I voted no for it. And the reason being that the union agreed to sit down and pretty much do this for free. And that wasn't even entertained, so I had a little problem with that. So, but then the big push from administration was, we're gonna save a lot of money. And I don't always agree with throwing a lot of money on something to save money. So with that said, I mean, I went through these slides again, and everything said could save. So this is year one, the contract of year one, we paid $150,000. So I want to know how much savings we realized in year one. Because potentially, when it was sold to us, it was going to be $1 million over 3 years. So how much savings did we realize this year using Rubicon?
So I'm not clear what a dollar amount that we saved for this year. But what I could tell you is this, Rubicon, to this point, and Valerie and Tim, I appreciate you hopping on here tonight. And I know there's some folks here from DPW that are here to, to watch the presentation, but you heard their presentation say we had 90% participation. I know you asked a question initially about what do they do from the contract until the implementation. I think, Valerie hit the point where the city didn't even have any of the routes written down, and the DPW crews have been very supportive, and I will acknowledge, and again, I know Roger and Bruce are here, they've been very helpful, and they've done a great job. And I think, this is a change, it's a technology. I think there's an opportunity for not only the DPW employees to embrace some change, but it's an opportunity for the city to recognize really what it is that our crews are doing on the street out there. I know just in the past couple of weeks, I've engaged, and I was just with Chris yesterday afternoon, with residents. We have multifamily dwellings that, code enforcement is called. Do they have 3 residents? Are there 3 apartments? Are there 4? Are there 5? Are they commercial buildings that require commercial pickup? I think these are just things that over the years, our DPW crews have just, weathered the storms, if you will. They've picked up the trash. The city has been taking it on the chin. I think this data that we're collecting now, and they've worked hard to not only put these streets together and these routes together, but now they're seeing the benefits of that. They have 90% participation. We know what the vehicles are doing. We could recognize, to answer your question, I don't know if there was a dollar saved this year, but I think the opportunity is there with the data that we're collecting, and we're only going to be as good as the data we put into it. So, the opportunities that we have, I think, moving forward are for the betterment of not only for the city and the taxpayers, but for the betterment of the employees as well, recognizing that the drivers and the collectors that are out there every single day don't necessarily have to put up with an angry resident that came out that said their trash was out there when really it wasn't. I can't imagine, I know it's possible it could happen, but I can't imagine that our garbage crews go down a street in a normal residential neighborhood and just, intentionally drive by someone's yard. Yesterday, I know the issue we had was that the trash was not from the sidewalk to the curb, it was actually still in the yard. piling up. So these are things that I think Chris and the staff up at DPW have done a great job following up with the residents, following up with these questions and concerns. And I think as long as we stay consistent with it and we continue to move forward with collecting this data and refining it, and I think that Valerie pointed out that this information, will be implemented, we'll refine it later on this year, and next year we'll refine it again, and we'll be ready to go for the year after to see where those savings are. I was keeping track too. I think it's somewhere around $500,000 that she may have pointed out, 125 into 324, so maybe about $500,000. If we could do all the things that we're talking about, optimization of routes, making sure that we're safety, making sure that the vehicles are taken care of. Those pre-checks and post-checks are things that not only help us with the maintenance factor, but it also protects the drivers that have CDL licenses. So, to answer your question, and I know it's always an issue, but to answer your question, I don't know if there's a dollar saved this year. But don't forget, we were starting from scratch, just developing these routes, developing the data, getting everything compiled so that we can make these decisions and refine these routes for the betterment of the city and the routes and the workers.
Larry, can I ask a question? Would you say that the DPW workers see the value in this? Overall?
So let me just say, when it first started, and I think I had this conversation with Roger, and some of it, was just in passing. Obviously, when you're talking about implementing technology, is the management, or is the city just looking to spy on the drivers, keep an eye on us? I know that's always a fear, and we know that the trucks now are tracked. So I guess from that perspective, I guess you could say there may be some founded fear there. That being said, I think Valerie pointed out, we've had 90% participation from our drivers. And I think they've also recognized that the information and data that we've gotten back, and I have not shared this with Roger, but Jack Rieger, our IT director, was here earlier. I spoke to him last week. We were talking about the dashboard and the things that I know that you have access to every day. But the data that was out there, he actually said to me, do you know you could tell which driver had the most stops, dumped the most tonnage individually? I'm not so sure we've ever shared that data with them. So the point of all that is that, to spread the burden equally on the drivers and the workers and the collectors. Listen, it's no secret, they work in the sun, they work in the rain, they work in the snow, they work in adverse conditions. This is not a pitch here to a sob story for the workers, but the point is that it's a very difficult job. We recognize that. The least we could do is collect data and give them supporting tools that make their job better, make it safer, and make sure the taxpayers are getting what they're paying for as well. So to answer your question, I don't know if they embraced it in the beginning. I personally have not heard anyone really complain about it lately. I know that there's always some pushback, with implementing some new tools and some new techniques, but I don't think there's been real pushback on it as of late. And I think moving Chris to that role, I did hear this directly from several of the employees, that they found that having Chris supervising the refuse piece, being able to continue on their route while a resident's complaining, Chris responds to the location, diffuses the issue, whatever that case is, whether Chris is calling code enforcement or we're calling them back, maybe it was a legitimate miss, but there's an opportunity now for those operators and drivers to continue on doing what they're doing. And I know that there's a role here for Rubicon. There's a tool or a piece of this technology that allows the drivers and the collectors to actually take photographs for those consistent residents that consistently violate and overpack the streets and overpack the garbage. There's an opportunity here, and I know it's kind of cliche, but we're only going to get out of it what we put into it. So if we're looking to save money, and again, I'm going to reiterate, I think the DPW workers currently, the ones that we have up there that are using this technology, they have been 90% compliant with it, working with management to make sure that the data and the inputs are there. There are some things we have to work on in terms of the daily stuff, but overall, we've had great participation from our workers, our workforce up there. So we're just going to continue down that path to make sure that the data that we're putting in is getting the outputs we're looking for. So the $1 million piece, Mr. McAndrew, I don't know if that's the mark, but I guess, not mark, but if that's the target we're going to get here. But I could tell you that the data that we're collecting and the ability for us to monitor that would only help us in the long run to save some money for the city.
Mr. Ross, it seems like we've already reduced the go-backs. Is that what I'm hearing from just being able to respond to residents better and to provide more education. The trucks don't have to return as much to those properties. Is that already happening?
Yeah, and I know you could talk to that, Chris, you're with them every day.
Yeah, so when situations like that happen, I have the ability, I brought one of my tablet with me. I have the ability to go in there and see exactly what the driver's telling me on the radio before I even get out there. So that way, when I arrive on the scene, I can already have a kind of an idea, an overview of what is happening at that stop. So when I get there, I can explain to the resident, hey, we can take, you know, the household garbage, but some of this stuff we can't take. We're not allowed to take it. You're going to have to get either a private hauler, or you're going to have to break some of it down, disperse it between the bags, and that way, if we have to, we can come back. Other times, it's allowed me to be able to say to the resident, listen, this is not something that we can take. For instance, paint. We can't put paint cans in the truck, and until you know, put some cat litter into that paint can, we're not going to take it. Which then will make it so that way next week we come back, the resident has complied. So instead of going back to that area that day, again, having to drive around, that resident now knows, okay, well, I understand what the situation is. I'll just put it out next week once I've rectified it. So instead of going back, it's on the driver's normal route.
That's an example. I know there was just a street paved up on East Scranton that there was a resident who put paint cans out, and our refuse crews picked it up, put it in the back of the Packer. The cans opened up, spilled all over the newly paved road. Thankfully, you know, our crews responded back out the next day. The DPW crews went back out the next day, pressure washer. And I did actually get an email from the resident thanking us for sending the crews out. They did a great job with it. So again, it's paint, it's small things, but they're the things that matter to the residents, that really, you know, it's the quality of the service, it's the things that we're just working to make better here in the city.
So to start with go-backs, I'm glad to see, I'm sure there's probably some savings there. When it came to go-backs, we only get about 5 to 6 go-backs per week, correct?
No. So, for instance, today there was 3 issues that my drivers reported. 2 of them were trash not out, and 1 of them was bulk items. So it's not a week, it's a daily issue. And I have the ability on the dashboard to be able to go in and pull up 3 months at a time to run a list of all the issues that were reported. And it's multiple issues on pretty much every day that we run. It's something I don't think we realized through the city how much this was actually happening. And just that simple fact of being able to monitor that, to be able to track that and see especially which neighborhoods were getting more refuse put out, which areas were having to send, or we were having to send drivers back out. That simple fact alone is not only helping our drivers, it's also helping the residents, and it's helping management. So that way we can actually address the situation in a more meaningful manner as a city.
So back when we were first starting this conversation, I did ask Mr. Preamble about go-backs, and he came back to me with, he had collected data. There was 5 to 6 go-backs per week. So you're telling me at this point in time, we're seeing more go-backs?
Yes. Well, we are seeing more issues reported, because the whole point of that is to eliminate that. So that way when a resident calls and says, you didn't take my trash, we can say, we have a picture. Your trash was on the side of your house. We were there at this time. It's tagged location and it's tagged time. So that way we don't have to go back and forth with the resident. We actually have the evidence. No, you didn't put it out on time, you know. And then I can make a determination depending on, you know, the size of the amount that wasn't put out and other factors that go
Chris,
into
who takes
day-to-day.
that picture? The guys working the truck?
Excuse me?
The guys that are working the truck take those pictures?
Yes. Yes, the
And
driver.
They take a picture of each resident in the city's garbage?
No. They only
If
take
it's
pictures.
not out, right?
Yes, if it's not out, they'll take a picture of where the cans' locations are. If there's bulk items, for instance, if there is a apartment clean out, they'll take pictures of that. They'll also take pictures of things that aren't supposed to be in the trash, like toilets, pipes, wires, stuff that we wouldn't be able to take to the dump, as well as if there's contamination. There's been quite a few times where I've had to send street sweepers up because there's been motor oil placed inside of a plastic bottle, then placed in the trash, where we obviously can't know about that. The blade closes, it explodes the bottle, and it goes all over. But being able to have that, we can then use that to inform the resident, listen, we stopped at your house today, this happened, we can't take the motor oil, so please don't do it again. We just had an incident last week where that happened, and the ability for me to be able to see that before I even get out there allows me to be able to be better prepared for when I talk with the resident.
Chris, does that also trigger, we've had situations where there are like out-of-town landlords, and I guess the people that are living in those apartments, oftentimes, they don't put the garbage out. And then, you know, I have legitimate complaints, we all get them, from neighbors who live next to these rental apartments, and they're like, listen, these people haven't put their garbage out for 2 or 3 weeks. And that's a quality of life issue, and also a health and safety issue. So when that occurs, are you then reporting that to LIPS or someone?
Yes. So whenever I come across a situation such as that, especially if it's an egregious one, my first week down at DPW was on Facebook. There was I guess a tenant had left an apartment, and the landlord had just thrown everything out on the street. No bags, just out on the street, to the point where it's blown across the street, into the neighbors' yards, creating more issues than having just put that into a trash bag. So I was able to notify code enforcement. Code enforcement came out. They were able to cite the landlord. We, of course, still picked it up, but now we're able to hold people accountable, and we have photographic evidence for when these situations happen, which actually happen a lot more than you would think. The amount of the trash that is getting put out is increasing as people come to our city. Of course, the increase in population is going to cause an increase in trash consumption. So this whole system allows us to monitor that, so that way as we go further as a city, we'll be able to make adjustments, whether it's, you know, hiring more people or whatever we have to do in order to meet up and continue.
Was that the issue on South Webster yesterday, was that rectified today? So there's another
Yes.
example. There was some complaints, I know there were some complaints that have come to your office anyway regarding residents on South Webster Avenue yesterday. So I actually drove down myself yesterday afternoon. I called Chris, we met him down there. Chris actually, you know, recognizing what it was, and this was a situation where it was a multi-tenant building in a residential neighborhood. There was some trash that was on a sidewalk, multiple bags on the ground that were partially torn open. There were multiple containers from different parts of the residence. Some were metal containers, some were plastic containers. Some were within the vicinity of the sidewalk. Most of it was not. It was in the yard. So Chris knocked on the door and advised the residents that, listen, it is only a 4-unit building, which requires the city to pick up that trash, right? So anything more than 4. But this is a 4-unit building. So Chris knocked on the door, addressed it, say, hey, listen, if you take the trash down to the curb, we could pick it up tomorrow morning, which was not normal route, but we did take care of it today. But these are things that, you know, I don't know what had happened here in years past, whether we expected our workers to walk onto private property to collect garbage. I don't know, but I think knowing where we're at today, I don't think it's too much to ask that we ask our residents to bring their trash and their recyclables to the curb and let our crews do the work they're supposed to do and pick it up the right way. Not to mention, we don't know what it is we're picking up when we're walking in someone's yard. So there's a process here, and again, I think I think this data, and I appreciate Rubicon hopping on here, but the data that we're collecting now, I think will only inform us to make those better decisions as we move forward.
Are there plans, or can there be a push for, like, an educational campaign for residents to tell them that, like, this is what you need to do in order to get your trash taken, to prevent even you getting those calls or having these issues, or to reduce the number of them? I understand maybe renters or more transient residents that it may be difficult to get to those people, but at least to the homeowners, so that they're aware of what they need to do.
That's a great point, and I know yesterday that on South Webster, there was a language barrier with one of the residents that was there. So, yes, the short answer is yes. I think there's some things we could do better. You know, again, I think the vast majority of our residents and taxpayers know the route, know what to do with the trash. It is those that are either transient or coming in new to our community, and or those who are leaving and just leave things behind. Maybe we have landlords that don't know our policies as it relates to our public refuse pickup. So to that point, yes, although I do think that the city as a whole, we have done a fair job of, it is obviously on our website, and I know this is just kind of cliche, there's information out there, if they so choose to find it, it's just getting that information to those who are necessarily looking for it. So short answer is yes, I think we could do a better job, and we should find a way to promote those routes. And but again, going back to Rubicon, I think that I think Valerie pointed out here, there's a way that we can consolidate not necessarily consolidate, but make these routes more efficient, and make these routes, more, so that neighborhoods know, and it's not all over the city, but I think we could do better at that, and that's something we'll work toward. But to your point, I think, yeah, we could notify residents about what it is that could go to the curb and what should be out at the curb.
So I know we're partly through the rollout. Where would you say we're in the rollout, and when is that 100%?
I'm sorry, what was that?
I know we're like halfway through the rollout. We just saw a timeline here, and I know we're not quite there yet.
So there's a refining period, and Valerie, correct me if I'm wrong, if you pull that slide back up, it was like the second or third slide at the beginning. We're at the phase now where we're getting into where we're going to start refining some of the routes and the information. Let's see if it's on there.
So we're in about phase 2.
There you go, that one right there. So the question was, where are we at in the phase? So right now, we're in phase 2, still collecting some of the data. As you can see, we're going to begin in January into phase 3, which is the refining piece. So all the data that we have been collecting, the routes, the tonnage, the vehicles, so that'll be the next step.
We're running, at this current time, we're running all of these digitized routes. 100% of these routes are being run through this system currently.
So Valerie, the question is, are we running the digitized systems through all the routes right now as it's currently running? The existing routes?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's running on trash, recycle, cardboard, and paper.
Right, so the routes that are up there, they're routes that we had put in, that the drivers had identified, correct, the existing routes? So right now, we're just collecting data off the routes that we had originally been running in the city.
So it's not, 100% of the city isn't routed as of yet.
It has not been rerouted, it's just been routed, identifying what the routes are. Again, remember, Valerie's opening comments were that when they started this process, the city DPW, we had zero information as to what the routes were. They were literally with the drivers is how the routes were. So that collection of data, refining the routes, getting them digitized, getting them up into the systems, and now we're just running through the process of collecting the data. Again, where the routes are, and I know you couldn't see it up there, but there's a slide that indicates where we could actually tell when a vehicle, how long it stopped. It stopped for 7 seconds, it moves 25 feet, it stops for 12 seconds. So you could actually tell specifically how long a vehicle's actually stopped for. So that's the route optimization piece. I think that gets us to where our refining point comes in, where that we can make routes a little better. And that doesn't mean that what we have up there today is a wholesale change. That doesn't mean that. All it means is that we could probably do better in refining some of the routes that are currently existing and make it more feasible for the city.
So right now, we have 104 weekly routes. That covers the whole city.
104 routes covers the entire city, Valerie?
Yes, across all those different ways.
Right, so it's going to be refuse and recycling.
Correct.
Right.
And then at some point in time, you're going to use this routing system to probably shave some of these routes off for savings. I know in the initial return on investment, it said maybe 2 routes per week were going to be shaved off for savings.
Well, I think that was their estimate. I don't think there's anything that says that's definitive. I think what it was just a projection saying that based on the initial analysis, that's a possibility. but I don't think there's anything that's definitive that says that we're going to do that. I think there's more, I think as we go through this adoption phase and the refining phase, give us more data, but I don't think there's anything that says that definitively we're going to get rid of routes.
Yeah, I mean, my mindset is going towards savings. So, I mean, when we were being sold this, we were being sold on savings. I like the Harrisonville, PA, or the Harrisonburg, Virginia model, because it's 52,000 people. It's more comparative to us. When we were looking at those original ones, we were talking about Atlanta and Kansas City, where are nowhere near the population. So what I saw tonight was I saw 34,000 in consulting fees, printing, things like that, 58,000 in fuel and vehicle and labor. I saw $30,000 in savings. So that ended up being about 124,000, which were estimated saving. Then we have the 395,000. So that 395,000 annual savings was based off comparisons with Atlanta and Kansas City, which were some of my concerns at the time, because I didn't think we were comparing comparable cities. Can Valerie explain, she's explained about 124,000 annual. Can she explain where the rest of those savings come from?
Valerie, did you hear his question? No. So the councilman was asking, when we were originally here, and I wasn't here for it, so I'll just go off what Councilman Schuster had said, was basically that when Rubicon was in here in the early stages, when they were signing legislation to contract with your company, basically the savings, the cost savings that we're alluding to that you had pointed out earlier were, I did the math too, it was 125,000 with some change, but the one big cost savings was the $394,000. That, if I remember correctly, that was a direct in route optimization and reduction, right? So is there some way, and the council wants to know, is there some way we're going to get to that savings without reducing workforce or routing? Is there some other way that
No,
we
excuse me, that wasn't my
Sorry?
question.
Okay.
I don't think it was discussed with reduction of workforce, anything like that in the
Okay.
original
Well, that's what it wasn't
presentation.
there.
Yeah, the savings is stated is 395,000. I would assume that includes this 124.
Okay.
So the total annual savings is 395. I've only heard her present about 194. So where would we find this additional savings?
So the 394 that was listed in your slide deck, is that include the 125,000 from the 3 or 4 other options that we found savings, or is that separate? So is it 394 plus 125, or is the 125 included in the 394?
No, the 394 is exclusive to the food optimization as an estimate of reducing one crew per day. So that was just for the food optimization. That included, costs for the staff, the truck, the maintenance. Now there's additional savings, yes, that is there. I think the other big primary driver of savings that we were speaking about before is related to reducing rollbacks. And that is really creating that feedback loop between drivers running issues in the field, and then when citizens call in to request, there's actually a dispatcher or someone like Chris who is looking at the information and saying, we have a legitimate reason not to go back. So that's, I think, probably the next largest driver of savings. And Chris is doing a great job. I think there's a dispatcher there at Public Works who doesn't yet have a computer, but once we get that system going, and also a lot of folks we've worked with, once residents learn that there is this technology aboard trash trucks, then they will stop calling. In a lot of cases, you'll see a reduced number of calls in for service requests for miscollection. And then I think the other big driver, in addition to this, is around the fleet maintenance. So really having a more proactive preventive maintenance program with all the information coming from the fault codes and the pre-trip inspections.
At this point in time, have we gotten any maintenance feedback from any of the trucks?
Yes, so every day before they go out and every day when they come back, the drivers have to document anything that they see wrong with the truck, which is allowing us to monitor everything from fuel levels to wear and tear on the vehicle, which means if the driver is reporting the air pressure isn't building up correctly, it's taking a little bit longer than it should, that allows the driver to be able to alert the fleet services manager, Scott, say, hey, air's not building up correctly. So we can pull the truck in before it even goes out, get that issue resolved and taken care of before the driver goes out, and, you know, knock on wood, has a catastrophic, you know, brake failure, or the truck can't stop, or makes it so that way the driver can't drive back, and then we have to send another vehicle out to bring that truck back, or have to take it to another place to get serviced.
Have we had any feedback come back from the field that said this truck is about to break down, go down, anything like that? Or we're just maintaining fuel levels, things like that as we go?
I wouldn't be able to answer that. That is outside of what my purview is.
I could call Scott, or email him, I could ask him if that's, just, again, CDL licensed drivers that, driving vehicles that require CDL licensing, air brakes, whatnot, you really should be doing pre-trips anyway on the vehicles. It's part of your CDL training. But all that being said, I know things become cumbersome in the morning, tight shifts, working, collecting trash. I get all that. But this really is a preventative maintenance piece that allows the drivers to make sure that their safety checks, make sure they have both mirrors on the truck, make sure that, the air in the vehicles and the brakes work properly, making sure that all the tires have air in them. I know it sounds kind of simple, but the fact is they're heavy vehicles that carry a lot of weight. And by the way, throughout the course of the day, those trucks gain weight and it shifts within the vehicle. They're compacting things in there. So I'm not trying to tell you anything that doesn't seem natural, but the fact is that these trucks, they work hard and they work a lot. So they're bound to break. But pre-checks and post-checks are meant to serve a purpose. But I can find out if there's been anything catastrophic or something that's been big.
I was just, again, I'm looking in terms of saving. So this contract goes for 3 years. At the end of 3 years, is this system totally turned over to the administration and the Department of DPW of Scranton?
So Valerie, you could answer that question, and I'm not 100% clear, so I'll turn to you, and I think I know the answer, but when we entered a contract with Rubicon, it's a 3-year contract. After 3 years, the equipment that we purchased and data is that owned by the city and not by Rubicon, correct?
Data belongs to the city, yeah.
What about the equipment that we purchased through the pads and the data collecting equipment?
Yeah, the iPads and the Telemax devices are leased.
Yep.
So those devices go back to Rubicon. If you continue your contract, we replace those for you and they're leased, so you always have up-to-date, functional.
So the system isn't completely turned over to the city after the completion
No,
of
just the data is the
contract?
city's.
Gotcha. Are we going to be compiling all the savings of the lifetime of this contract?
You mean in terms of dollars and cents? Well,
Correct.
certainly, the intention to make sure that whatever data we could collect that shows the savings that we'd have that information.
Yeah.
Maybe have to compile it. I don't know if they would actually provide it for us, but certainly year to year, we could figure it
Yeah,
out.
I mean, just in terms of contracts, we're going to spend money over a 3-year period, we're looking for savings, just to have that data for
Understood,
us.
yep.
These contracts are making sense.
Understood. Yep.
So could I follow up? So we're going to spend $450,000 for 3 years on this contract. What we end up receiving is some direction, some good, solid data supposedly to produce savings. So do we end up, I wasn't clear, I didn't hear that clearly. We keep the mobile digital equipment,
We
right?
do not.
We do not. So is the
It
goal?
is leased.
Okay, so we get the data. So the goal after 3 years, is it to be for us to do this ourselves and maintain it, or to re-up another 3-year contract?
So that's a great question, and I don't know the answer to that, to be candid with you. I know that when Rubicon was introduced for cost savings, the opportunity for the city, again, if nothing else, it allows us to really know what we had out there, because prior to Rubicon and tracking the trucks, we really had no idea. That being said, I think that might be an option, whether or not we could do it in-house versus having a contractor do that. I don't know the answer. I'm not an IT guy, but certainly we could engage Rubicon if we had to do, I don't know if they do yearly contracts to extend it by the year, or if we would actually go outside and bring that information inside and do it in-house. I don't know the answer to that.
So I just want to say I do appreciate Rubicon tonight joining us, even virtually, to explain how the program is going so far, but it did take us some time to be able to set this up, and council had been asking for an update for a while now. can we expect our next update after Phase 2, like in January?
So I gotta ask council, and I know Rubicon's on here, I'm not gonna put them on the spot to check their calendars, but if you want them to come back in January or February, I'm glad to ask them if they want to come back. If you want to come back every 6 months or quarterly, I'm certain they would oblige that.
Yeah, I mean, initially, when this was presented to us, we were presented with yearly savings. So I think me and Mr. McAndrew's request at that point in time was, okay, the contract has passed.
Yeah.
Please come back in a year.
With all due respect, I'm not so sure it was reasonable to expect that we would have a savings. We didn't even have data put in until May 1st. So, I mean, if we're going to realize savings, we need to put the data in to find out really exactly what is that we're, where the routes we're going, the tonnage we're picking up. So, listen, we'll do our best to collect the data, and we'll continue to work with Rubicon, and hopefully we'll show that savings. They're the professionals. We're going with what they're offering us. So that's all I could say. That's all we could offer.
Yeah, I mean, coming from my perspective, I'm just making sure that we're getting the
Sure.
most out of these contracts.
And I appreciate that, because that's the idea, is we had nothing before, we have a collection system and data, and let's do the best. We only get out what we put into it, so if we put the data in, it tells us what the data is, then we can make decisions based on that real data. Okay?
Thank you. Does anyone else have any questions? I just want to say thank you for coming in.
Sure.
And Chris, thank you for taking on that role down there and doing it well. So thank you. We'll take a 30-second break, 60-second break before
Thanks,
we
Val.
start our
Thanks, Tim.
regular council meeting.